Good afternoon. My name is Aiza. I'm a sophomore in Mountain View High School and I come from Lawrenceville, Georgia. I'm competing in chapter interview. I will illustrate to you the history of Mountain View from the year 2020 to 2021. Here is a brief overview of what I will be going over. Although I cannot address these topics in the most detailed form, I will be covering all of them to the best of my abilities. Before we begin the actual presentation, it is important to go over how I set up the presentation and how I planned for it. When I decided I wanted to participate in STAR events, I realized that a major concern for me in terms of chapter and review is to make sure that I'm recording a general history for the year. So I set a goal that by the end of January, the end of recording, I will have a decent documentation for the year. Well, how do I do this? I formed a plan. I need to make sure that I'm taking the information that I'm witnessing throughout the multiple events throughout the year and writing them down somewhere, snapping photos where I can to add a touch of illustration, and staying in contact with our FCCLA chapter. Overall, my focus is to keep track of events being executed throughout the school year. I follow up the plan by taking action. Action is taken through activities such as jotting down notes and staying in contact with Mountain View officers, the members, and the advisor. This is done through digital formats such as Remind, Zoom, and Gmail. I follow up on my implementation. I believe I was able to keep an accurate form of communication with my FCCLA peers and handle the tasks of recording just as efficiently. Here is the evidence to my submission. Membership campaigns. First off, how do we promote membership? Well, this year we decided to stick to a more manageable and simple float by just sticking to national membership campaigns. Our two highlighted campaigns that were promoted, especially in our most recent meetings of December and January, were All In with Georgia FCCLA and Go for the Red. In its most basic form, we advertised the two campaigns and really encouraged members to bring friends to chapter meetings near the end of 2020. Here's the membership campaigns on the slide. Although our membership campaigns this year were simple, our chapter exceeded in terms of meetings. Throughout the month of August, our chapter worked to really plan and prepare for the new year. For instance, on the 3rd of August, we had an officer meeting to discuss ideas of improvement on what we could do better from the last year, all while wrapping up our preparation for an interest meeting and a chapter meeting. Near the end of August, the team practiced their scripts and worked on ideas such as t-shirt design, a creative speaking competition, and upcoming programs. Here is a rough snapshot of the meeting notes that I took, the people that attended or the officers that attended, and the meeting itself. Again, for the majority of the year, our meetings were digital, so the most accurate form of history I had were the notes at my fingertips. And although I do not have pictures of physical people in my photos, please feel free to pause the video and take a look at what I was jotting down in these notes if you want to know what we were talking about. As I was saying, near the end of August, our group was planning to say what we would say to our members, and that is what you see highlighted in the notes here. For the month of September, we kicked off our FCCLA chapter meetings with an interest meeting on the 3rd, followed up with a lovely chapter meeting on the 10th. This month was our chance to introduce FCCLA to new members, to give off that first impression. And our members or our officers worked really hard to give that first impression, even with the digital challenging format provided. Here's the meeting agenda we used for the interest meeting. October was a unique month in our history, as instead of a normal chapter meeting, we decided to conduct an FCCLA watch party. Lots of members had a blast, we learned about upcoming events, and received our local t-shirts. And for those of you wondering, we were following COVID regulations and social distancing, and in the pictures we are wearing masks. In November, our chapter started to focus more so on specific events in order to encourage involvement. For instance, we had a region meeting on the 5th where multiple and various workshops were introduced to our members, ranging from skills like goal setting through Power of One or utilizing social media, or even college advice or college tips. Members from our chapter benefited greatly. On top of that, our local vice president of competitive events held a STAR events training workshop which was really beneficial towards the new members that were trying to lay a foundation in STAR. We finished it off with an officer meeting to plan for December. By planning for December, we as chapter officers were able to come up with the idea of inviting a guest speaker to talk about financial planning. Her name is Ms. Thames. December, again, here is the picture of our December meeting. January was the usual month with its chapter meeting. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go extravagantly over the top with our ideas this time, as we just conducted a simple chapter meeting and talked about upcoming events such as Power of One and STAR and other relevant topics. Recognition activities. Moving on, throughout the year, we recognized members for their efforts primarily through our presentations. For example, the region meeting recognized members in the beginning slides, as depicted below the text. Members also received certificates for participating in the Korean speaking competition, and we primarily used digital formats such as Zoom and Remind to really recognize these members throughout the whole year. Here is a closer look at the recognition we got, or the awards given to members. And the next slide depicts the recognition posted in the advisor's room. Mount View FCCLA has had a series of projects throughout the year. We attended leadership events such as Fall Rally, Fall Conference, and Discover Training in a decent level of participation. We held a region meeting, as mentioned before, where winners for Korean speaking along with t-shirt design competitions were announced. We had cooperative projects where we looked at really collaborating with other clubs in our school to fund activities or bring boxes to ESOL families and help put smiles on children's faces through our annual Trunk or Treat event. The individualized projects are very self-explanatory, but very influential to the timeline of this year. The region meeting workshops were previously mentioned, and pictures of the presentation for the actual event are in this presentation if you want to visibly look at them. We also did an officer induction ceremony on September and worked on hands-on community service projects. Some of these voluntary works or efforts that I included were previously mentioned, such as partnering with clubs to host a Thanksgiving event where we really just hosted an event for Thanksgiving meals and our annual Trunk or Treat event. In terms of development and progression of our chapter's resources, unfortunately, although our chapter did heave through many obstacles and trials through this time, we still had our weaknesses. Furthermore, our chapter resource development and chapter budget this year were lacking in that the actual funding was not a part of reality. Our members this year and in the past year were struggling in terms of financial stress, and we did not want to financially burden them even further. And so we decided to avoid this topic to avoid their stress. And although we did have a planning meeting in the beginning of summer to conduct more ideas, more outside activities in person, we had to lose that dream along with many others due to our COVID-19 situation, and we hope for more next year. The budget is on the slide after this, and although our efforts were conducted towards getting a financial speaker or a guest speaker to talk about financial speaking, she did not show up and the meeting did not go as planned. Here is a chapter budget. In terms of state and national programs, however, in my opinion, I feel we were very creative. It was very intriguing, as we were forced to think outside the box. We started in the summer by getting engaged with Run for Red 5K and built ourselves up from there on. As mentioned previously, we partook in a Trunk or Treat event in October and a series of drives as a part of community service and Families First. Here's all those events in more detail. Public relations efforts. Our chapter was able to bring ideas to the public in an effective manner this year. As you can see, we really went all out with the means of communicating to people online. It really helped to spark our creativity with promoting our chapter digitally. The series of events that occurred throughout our chapter's year reflect core ideas of FCCLA and Family and Consumer Sciences. This is because there is a major connection between the multiple opportunities and efforts that we inputted throughout the pandemic. To whoever that might be listening, 2020 was a year that presented fine and distinct limits in terms of outside opportunities and participation and involvement. The majority of the clubs and organizations that a lot of our students knew were really waning. We could not access them as much. They were reducing their normal activity, and community service really wasn't a reality that much in this year and the past year. But in Mountain View FCCLA, members came forward and laid the accessible foundation for community service opportunities, drives, leadership events, national program-based events, and even more. The purpose of Family and Consumer Science related education is to drive students towards opportunities related to general life skills, the importance of nutrition, financial management, and even more. I believe that our efforts into providing these opportunities to students who did not have these opportunities, who were robbed of these opportunities, really is a showcase, is a depiction of what FCCLA represents, what Family and Consumer Science education represents, what the FCCLA Creed represents, and represents them as a whole. Moving on to the questions. What is one skill that you learned upon during your project that you will use in the school year or future career? A skill that I learned personally throughout this year in the aid of this project was really dedication with persistence. Although I was familiar with the idea of commitment beforehand, this event really helped to consistently bring me back and record information every month. It really built up a grit inside of me. And I can use this skill wherever there is a need to plan a goal. It really can be applied to all sorts of realms, really all realms, because it is goal setting in its most basic form, either it be academic, extracurricular, or personal. What obstacles caused challenges to your work, and how did you address them? The majority of the difficulties I had with this presentation, with this project, with this work, was agglomerated to the fact that our situation was digital. Our chapter was expecting a different year, and we were planning to take a predictable and straightforward path. We were expecting an easy road. We were not expecting a hard and rocky path, and that is what we got. So, although this year presented that rocky path, and members had scratches from walking that rocky path that they did not have before, really, I am just proud because our chapter tackled this path. It really tackled it, adapted to this path, and we moved forward. We addressed that issue with creativity, we addressed that issue with persistence, and I'm really just happy with how we addressed that issue, how we reacted to it, by coming up with ideas to hold community service projects and all sorts of other events. Overall, I'm completely satisfied with our chapter's history, and coming full circle, I would like to conclude with a Mandarin proverb: "A journey of 1,000 miles begins at one's feet." Thank you for listening.